7th day of May, a sunny 60-degree day today as we move a little deeper into the month of May. We'll do some basketball in a little while. As we begin the day, there's a couple of things on the table. The first, this, and I'm sure by now you've at least have people reference it, this crazy story of Earl Thomas. Now, you know what kind of player Earl Thomas is. I'm sure you're very well aware of that. You've watched him play all these years. We're talking about one of the premier defenders in the league, a guy who's on his way to on his way to the Hall of Fame. I mean, he was All-American college. He's been already on an all-decade team. He's been a 7-time Pro Bowler. He's been All-Pro 4 times. I mean, he's been in a Super Bowl winning safety. I mean, he's been on a lot of good teams. He's a wonderful player. Okay, but let's just say things got a little crazy here. And as always, TMZ had the story, don't they always? I mean, TMZ gets the story. You wind up in a hospital somewhere, and TMZ gets the story. You wind up in a police station somewhere, and TMZ gets the story. I don't know how exactly they do it, but give them credit. They do it. And when they say something, it usually turns out to be true. I tell you something, they do a heck of a job. Now, I think they're very good at throwing the money around, but you know what? Whatever works for them, it works in a big way. So Earl, I guess, went public because he knew TMZ had the story. And the story goes that his wife found out he was throwing a little party with some young ladies and took umbrage, showed up at the house with some friends of hers, and put a 9mm Beretta to his head, took the clip out, but I guess there was now listen, I don't know anything about guns, so I can't tell you. If you took the clip out, I would think that means that the gun doesn't have any bullets in the chamber, but I gather, according to the story, there still was a bullet in the chamber, and the safety was off, so she could have shot him in the head. He wrestled the gun away from her, and then as police arrive, she is chasing him around the house with a knife while he's got a gun. Now, he wasn't looking to use the gun, so you say, wait a second, the knife trumps the gun. He intercepted the gun. He got it away from her. He's a bullhawk. He got the ball. He got the gun away. So, and luckily for him, and very fortunately, she didn't use it because she didn't realize it was loaded, according to her. And she got arrested, and he had a lot of explaining to do. And basically what he said was, I wanted to come clean because for some reason TMZ had the story. Well, they always have the story. We know that every time. And now America's got the story, and it's one that's going to follow Earl Thomas around for the rest of his playing days. The vision everyone's going to have of Earl and his brother throwing a little party, having Earl's wife and a few of her girlfriends show up. She's showing up with a 9mm Beretta, and the craziness pursued. And the police, arrived. They got in the middle of it as she was chasing him around the house. Now, not with a gun, but with a knife. After he had wrestled the gun away from her, but she also had a knife. So she was looking to do damage with that while he was trying to make sure that she didn't do damage with anything. So, hey, I guess there's some athletes who are happy that Earl's story came along, so it's going to knock plenty of other stories off the top of the list. That's for sure. I mean, this one is a doozy, and I guess we're going to hear about it as there's court dates and plenty of things to discuss as this thing unfolds. So, as Earl said, families go through this, pray for them, in what was really the understatement of the year. So that is the Earl Thomas saga for this Thursday. They're going to have Tiger and Phil number 2. The first one was a bit of a dud. Right now, any sporting event will be treated and will actually be embraced. They hope that's the case with this golf. Now they will bring a couple of very familiar faces into the mix. Tiger will team with Peyton Manning. Phil will team with Tom Brady. They will raise a bunch of money. My understanding is, if I have it right, that they will put up a number themselves, which I believe the four of them will. Now, I don't know if this is all their money or there's sponsor money involved. I'm not sure about that. So don't ask me where every dollar of this $10 million that they are putting up, where that's coming from. But there will be $10 million given to charity, and there will be a mechanism to raise more money for the people, the workers, the everybody who is in need right now in this country. And there are a lot of people because of the pandemic who are in some financial need, some physical need. They need medicine. They need a place to stay. They need money. They need food. They need medical care, whatever it may be. So it looks like that will be the case. They'll play 9 holes of best ball, then 9 holes of alternate shot. And like I said, it will be more exciting because now you have 2 guys on each side, and maybe you get a little banter going, maybe you get a little rivalry going, get a little something going, because last time there was nothing going on, and it was not a very interesting event. We'll see. Then, and it was my son Jack who showed me this, and this is bad for Twitter, and that is having a player's account hacked, like the Freaks account was hacked, and all kinds of racist and vulgar and really awful stuff was put on his Twitter account, like he said it. I gather it might have been more than just the Twitter account. It might have been, I'm not sure if it was all his social media accounts or just Twitter. I'm not sure about that. I don't go to all the other ones, so I don't know. I gather his emails and even his bank accounts. So this was a very serious hacking. I don't know if they did any damage to him financially. I don't know if they did anything else to him, the hackers, but they clearly not only hacked him, but they really put a lot of just really awful stuff up that was supposedly, said by him, which is just, terrible stuff that he has to be a part of. So, ugly, misanthropic, racist, really ugly stuff that was tweeted. And obviously, he has nothing to do with this and has to deal with now his whole life having been hacked. So be careful, especially in this time when everybody is using their internet and social media, basically 20 hours a day or 18 hours a day. Be careful. Be careful with how you use it and how you secure what needs to be secured in that regard. The NBA is getting ready. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. We'll talk about it with Ira Windman in a little while about what's going on. There is movement afoot. There are people questioning exactly what's going to happen here. You've seen Cuban raise questions, but Cuban has raised these questions all along. And they've been the right questions, and they've been very fair. And basically he says, hey, I won't be comfortable till I hear a plan that shows that my players are going to be completely safe in every area, where the people around them who are going to be dealing with them are safe. The community that they're going to live inside of is going to be safe, whether it's a hotel or a convention center, the place where they're going to play and dress is safe, and that all parties have taken really left no stone unturned in making sure that this is the case and that their well-being is completely protected. And he said the safety of my players is tantamount, and that has to happen. So we'll see where that leaves them and what the plan we're moving towards is. It looks like we're going to start to see players far more visible, working openly, working in cities that are opened up. We know all cities aren't open right now, so it's a little bit of a someone will be here but no one will be there kind of thing. That's the way it is right now. As the league starts to begin its way back. We've heard rumblings about the NBA coming back. We've heard rumblings of there being a poll to NBA players this week as early as tomorrow. We've also heard about a July 1st date for baseball, which has been thrown about and bandied about the last couple of days, but we don't have anything more set or something that you can really rely on as far as a vehicle for anybody right now, to be honest with you, because I think there are still a lot of questions that both sides need to answer in terms of safety, in terms of protocol, in terms of testing. And as we alluded to yesterday, the NBA nor baseball want to be out in front where they feel they are showing the country that they are special, that they get special treatment, even though we know they do. They travel special. They don't travel on regular planes. They travel in private jets. They have everything cared for. They don't touch a bag. They just, get on the plane, get off the plane. That's all they do. And they travel in a very princely fashion. That's just the way it is. I mean, they live in a very regal fashion and they travel in a very regal fashion, as you would expect. These are world-class athletes, the best of the best. So that's what you would expect from that standpoint. We're waiting on baseball. The other issue there in baseball is if they open it up to all stadiums and we say we're going to use all stadiums, does that mean we know that every stadium in every city is cleared? Last night there were 26,000 new cases of the virus in America. You heard right, 26,000 new cases. It's not slowing down. It's slowing down here. But here it was an avalanche, so it had to slow down. It's not slowing down in a lot of places. It's worse in a lot of places. So as we tiptoe around this whole idea of what is permissible and what isn't, what can be, what needs to be protected and what doesn't, exactly what the threshold is and what it isn't, to me, there are still so many things they have to answer and such an irregular pattern. See, there's no central authority here, and that's where you run into huge trouble. And I've come to the conclusion that with testing erratic at best and just embarrassing at worst, and with no real central authority and states doing things on different timetables, I think each person is going to have to deal with his own health himself and do what's right for him. If you have a healthy fear of what's going on and you're in a position that you don't have to go back, then don't go back. Stay home. Stay out of the malls, stay out of the theaters, stay out of the stadiums until we get some drugs that work, and protect yourself. Nothing wrong with that. Even smart. If you're in a position financially, if you're in a position in terms of your age, if you're in a position in terms of people you need to protect, then at the absolute, to the fullest extent, do that. And if that means you don't get to a game for a year, you'll live. You can watch it on TV. A lot of fans prefer to watch it on TV anyway. Many do. I know plenty of people who prefer to watch games on TV. I've always been one to go to games. I told you, the only games where I go to where I really miss anything is I really miss replay when I go to a football game. I feel like I'm always looking for it. I'm like, I got to see a replay. I got to see it. So I do miss that. So I prefer the replay system, not in terms of calls, in terms of just being able to watch every play more than once. I think you can't see everything every time you look at it. Obviously, the TV doesn't allow you to do that, and I think isolation and replay both are invaluable and enhance the telecast incredibly. So that's why I miss those. That's why I'd rather watch the game at home anyway when it comes to football. The other sports, I think they're better in person. Football, I think, is better on television because of the reasons I gave you. Plus, there's really a symmetry between the sport and the vehicle and the instrument. It fits very well onto the TV screen. It fits extremely well there. And you're going to get a change this year, too, because Amazon is going to stream to the, not stream to the handheld phone, not stream to the computer, stream to the full-size television, which is a game changer. That has not happened before. Yes, there's been streaming, but it has been to tablets, to smartphones, not to major televisions. And now that is the case. It will be that will be part of it when they have an exclusive game late in the season, and that's a game changer in a very, very big way. All right, so we got a lot to do today. We'll hit the fan at 6. Ira Winderman when we come back. Back after this. Back on our NBA lives over the last weeks with this Jordan documentary, and here's someone who I haven't talked to in a while, who we've talked to through the years many, many times on the NBA, and that's Ira Winderman. Ira, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing good, Mike, and with them replaying so many of the great Knicks rivalry games, I still remember sitting with you guys down on the baseline. So
many times.
We still have nostalgia, yeah.
Ira used to sit next to us at a lot of games at the Garden, absolutely. I've talked many times about where Dog and I sat. Ira used to sit next to us many, many nights, many Fridays and Sundays. And and I said to people, I said, I was making a point the other day, there's been so much about the Knicks and the Bulls, but the Knicks and the Pacers, the Knicks and the Heat were just such great, intense games.
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't just Knicks and Bulls. It was Knicks and Pacers. It was Knicks and Heat. Knicks and Heat were great. I mean, Knicks and Heat had some unbelievable, wild, epic battles.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost as if it was Vince McMahon produced. And you know what the crazy thing is, Mike, how time flies when you realize this. On September 1st of this year, Pat Riley will have been with the Miami Heat for 25
That's unbelievable. Years. I mean, Pat, I still can't get over the beard. I mean, Pat, the new Pat. And I said to my wife, I said, Ro, what do you think of the beard? She goes, he looks good in anything. So, I mean, basically, I guess the women even like Pat with the white hair and the white beard. So Pat can pull off anything.
He can. You know what? And it's interesting because I listened to your first segment today, and then here's the problem with so much of this. We're talking about basketball in a bubble and limited people. Here's the dynamic that changes. I know from the Miami Heat, Pat Riley, we all agree, is a huge influence on the players. And yet we know if the NBA goes into a bubble, a 75-year-old man most likely is not going to be able to be part of that.
Yep.
So you sort of wind up with these other situations where no matter how you reconfigure the NBA, whether it happens, how it happens and where it happens, there's going to be a lot of familiar faces who aren't going to be around the game, and the dynamic clearly will change.
Well, let me ask you from a media standpoint, what do you think happens to people like you during this thing?
I'm sure there's going to be no print media there. I'm sure they'll have interview sessions where we'll probably get conference calls. I've been living on Zoom media, in Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something like that. It'll be a different media dynamic. I'm sure they have to limit the people as much as possible because, as you know, from the multiplier effect from social distancing, literally every single person you remove from the equation has a multiple impact on the rest of the people. So it'll be tiny. I think a lot of it will be done from a distance. As a matter of fact, I spoke to a friend who works at ESPN. They know they're going to be calling games from a studio,
no question.
Maybe in Bristol, maybe somewhere else. And even the local affiliates, the Fox and Yes and MSG, they'll call the games remote also. So I think you're going to lose, on one hand, a little of the personal contact. On the other hand, and I was listening to your first segment today, Mike, you know how great these TV production people are. And they can layer in crowd noise where it doesn't exist, and you wouldn't know. I mean, you're like me. You go back. The laugh track we hear on our sitcoms these days was recorded in the 50s, and it still works. So I think these games, without fans, can still be highly produced to a degree that you'd almost think fans were there.
We're talking about Ira Winderman, of course. One thing that's been – a lot of things have been forgotten in the season, but one thing is what a great job Riley did with this Heat team this year. Just a tremendous job with this team this year.
Yeah, when you look at this year and you're talking about Executive of the Year, and of course what the Clippers and Lawrence Frank, formerly of the Nets, did getting Kawhi Leonard, and the Lakers obviously with Anthony Davis in their roster. But then you see sort of the Heat development program, and I think it's a sort of good, cross relationship there to what the Knicks are doing. You have to develop your young players and get the right ones, and whether it's a Kendrick Nunn or a Tyler Hero or a Bam Adebayo or a Duncan Robinson, the Heat have found the players to grow with. You look at a team like the Knicks with a Kevin Knox you're not so sure about. Mitchell Robinson you are. What Pat Riley's done is remarkable because this is a guy we always said was a veteran coach, wanted free agent. Went out and got Bosh and LeBron and got proven guys. But now he's realizing in a salary cap and luxury tax world, you have to get the young, cheap help that works as well. It's almost like sort of a second career for him now as he's become this developmental GM when he used to be all about the veteran.
No, I think he's done really a wonderful job of really piecing together. And ironically, finding guys from his old school where he was, as people may know or may not know, where he was a big star. I mean, go back and watch Glory Road, okay, and see that's Pat Riley in the middle of everything, with the great Kentucky team under Adolph Rupp, this guy from Schenectady, who was an All-America, and also good enough to be drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. But this guy went to his old school and really he found some players.
Yeah, I mean, the last two first-round picks for the Heat were Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. We're almost joking this year at number 23. The Heat simply will take the best available Kentucky player. That's how it's been. And what's interesting, Mike...
Well, Hero's done really well. I always liked Hero at Kentucky, and he could always knock down a shot, and he was always a clutch player, and he's done a great job for you guys.
It's a shooter's league, and that's what Pat has done. He's gone away. Remember, Pat, you remember the great Knicks days. It was all about the big muscle. It was Anthony Mason and Charles Oakley and even Ewing. He realized the game has changed. You have to be a shooter to be relevant in today's NBA. That's what he's done. Even Bam Adebayo has developed a shot. Certainly Duncan Robinson, he was a Division III player, came out of Michigan undrafted. You have to have shooters, 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 and you're going to see that in this year's draft whenever it is. If you're the traditional big man, forget it. If you're the bulky power four, Vernon Carey Jr., perfect example out of Duke. He's old school, but in today's NBA, when you don't score more than 4 or 5 feet out of the paint, maybe Montrezl Harrell is the exception. You don't have those kind of players. So Pat has gone all in on shooters, as have most of the teams. That's what makes a difference right now.
Reliving the Jordan thing, what has hit you? What is the thing that, if anything, jumped out at you about this thing?
What jumps out to me is this, that let's get this straight. Michael had final say on all of it. He has gotten himself painted into such an unflattering portrait. I wonder, is that because there's even worser stuff, to use a non-word? In other words...
Yeah, I think this is the better stuff. I really do. I think that's it. I think that's a good point. I think this is the allowable stuff.
Yeah, so think about that. Isn't it frightening when we see the way he's treated Barkley and Isaiah Thomas and Dan Marley and want to beat these guys down? Imagine what he must have done to some of the other guys. So you see that. When he comes out and won't even go against someone like Jesse Helms and lets that get in there, you got to wonder about the other stuff. I almost wonder if there was almost a sort of quid pro quo. Look, if we can gloss through the gambling, I'll let you have the other stuff so people can talk about that instead. But I really wonder, when someone's an executive producer and in charge of something like that, and I read the Ken Burns story in the New York Times where he said he would never give control to one of his documentaries to the subject of it. And yet Michael's controlling this, and that's how he's controlling it. I mean, Mike, maybe you disagree, but I think the Michael Jordan image takes almost a weekly hit on Sunday nights now.
Well, what I said to my boys who are teenagers and, they know the image, they know, and I said, let me just tell you, this guy was never, they said, Dad, what was he like? I said, well, first of all, I didn't know him very well, but I said, number two, he wasn't a really nice guy. He was a highly competitive, edgy guy, and that's how he's come out. That's how he's come across.
Yes, that he would rip your heart out if it meant he could beat you, and he did not have a lot of friends. We all knew that he traveled separately anyway. So, maybe it's the old cast yourself as the CEO. Maybe it's the old sort of cast yourself as that kind of person, as Michael Douglas in Wall Street. There's some people who want that kind of image, who want to be the Don or someone like that. I think that's what Michael's doing now in his career. But, man, I almost wonder what the unauthorized documentary would be like if this is the authorized version of it.
And he doesn't ever forgive. I mean, they live forever, no matter what the slight is. Barkley, if it's Isaiah, which we know, or whatever it may be, I mean, the slights go on and they live forever.
And I think that's why you remember, Mike, the odd story of Pat Riley retiring Michael Jordan's number, in Miami. I think Pat got on Michael's wrong side also with those physical Knicks teams of Mason and Oakley, and that sort of was the olive branch to Pat Riley, is that, hey, yes, we knocked you on your butt for 3 years in the playoffs, but I respect you. I think that led to Pat Riley retiring the jersey of Michael Jordan that still hangs at the rafters of American Airlines Arena, because I think Pat realized otherwise he wouldn't have been forgiven either.
What do you think the hardest part to sell to the players of any of these programs that they're thinking of is? What we're talking about Ira Winderman is they try to come back now and they're getting ready to have a call with all the players and do all this stuff.
Right.
They have a plan they're ready to offer. What do you think's the hardest part to sell?
I think the hardest part to sell is the whole health issue. Well, hey, you're going to test me today, but it doesn't mean I don't get it tomorrow. So I think unless they have the testing, which even Adam Silver, who's shrewd, who realizes I don't want my league to look bad by saying I'm gobbling up all the tests, the rest of you are on your own, so there have to be enough tests available. But I think the hardest sell is going to be any legitimacy to the season. I've already written in my Sunday columns is this is an asterisk season, Mike, no matter what. Because what if a player gets sick in the term of this and has to leave the bubble? Well, that changes everything. What if Giannis, for example, gets ill? The whole Eastern Conference changes. But here's part two of it. And Udonis Haslem mentioned this today, the Heat power forward. He said, what about our mental health? You want to put us into a bubble. They're probably talking for 2 months. How many people out there want to be away from their family, from their parents, from their children, even if they love what they do for a living? I mean, literally, you're almost talking about taking the NBA and putting them in the space station for a couple of months. I think that's going to be a hard thing. I think the NBA wants to be back. Like you said earlier, we want sports to be back. But I think it has to be reasonable also. We can live without it. It's difficult, but it's not life and death. And you know what? Today, Mark Lazary, businessman, one of the co-owners of the Bucks, said we might not start till August. Mike, my thought is this: why continually to bastardize future seasons? If the NBA is not going to start till August, they probably won't be done till sometime early October. All of a sudden, you're pushing next season that much farther back. You're keeping players out if there is a 2021 Olympics in Tokyo. I know that $1 billion is a really lot of money for the NBA to eat in lost revenue. But I'm not so sure you should keep hurting your future seasons by pushing back and pushing back and pushing back. Because you know what, Mike? The NBA might not be able to generate, its $1 billion of revenue this year. But this league is strong. It's not going away. This isn't the XFL, the USFL, the WFL. It's going to succeed and regain that money in future years. I think the NBA needs a much better cutoff point than trying to start this season in August. I think if you can't do it by June or early July and not be done by midsummer, I think you have to bite the bullet and move on. Players and owners, just that much less. You're still all going to be really rich people anyway.
Well, how much do you think, and we're talking about Aaron Winderman, this is a big key, just like they've turned to their, always hero in waiting in Jordan during this time. How much is LeBron, with the clock ticking and knowing I only have X many seasons, I have a good chance this year to make a final or play in a championship. I don't have that many left. I'll be darned, because you heard his quote, hey, every player wants to finish this thing. This thing gets finished. It's almost like he's putting his foot down that this thing gets finished.
Because he needs it finished for him. You're totally right, Mike. Look, I'm not going to write him off. The guy seems like he can go forever. He's having one of his best seasons. But maybe he has 3-4 years left.
Tops. He is having a very good year, which he knew he would when he didn't play a lot last year.
Right. He's in contention now. I'll give you another situation. This is why I think Mark Lazary said today that he wants the NBA to continue. Giannis Antetokounmpo could become a free agent in 2021. If the Milwaukee Bucks by then do not show him they can be a true playoff championship contender, he's all the more likely to walk. So Mark Lazary and the entire Bucks organizations want there to be a 2020 champion, want there to be a timely 2021 champion to show him, because after last year, what the Bucks did in the playoffs, if they struggle again, there probably are 5 or 10 smaller stories of very strong personalities who will be deeply affected by this. I mean, even the Clippers and what they did with Kawhi Leonard and trying to become the Kings of L.A. Hey, Paul George isn't getting much younger either. So there's a lot of teams that are facing expiration dates right now that they need this season. But, Mike, it's an asterisk season anyway, and I don't think there's any way to avoid it. I understand the money. I understand $1 billion in revenue is a very large number. but there has to be an end date. There has to be a date we all circle and say, look, you can't continue the 2019-2020 season after this date. We'll all circle it, and at least we'll know when the end is there.
Isn't it, Ira, does it seem to you, as it does to me, that there are parallel lines and the Jordan legacy and the LeBron legacy never intersect? They run parallel lines. They don't talk about each other. There's no talk. There's no, even Kobe was addressed. There's no LeBron address. There's not. It's almost like LeBron doesn't exist. And
well,
it's almost like on the other side, it's almost like they're separate, separate, generations.
Well, and they are, and you can't compare the game, but this whole genesis of Michael Jordan doing this came when LeBron was back at his highest point and in the finals every year, and Michael was sort of, hey, don't forget about me. There was talk about a Kobe Bryant project also, even though he played in the same era, much more so with LeBron James. But, yeah, I think this greatest of all time argument, because I'm not so sure in any other sport, Mike, and maybe you disagree, you can put two definitive and only two definitive names up there as wing scorers. You can talk about Russell and Chamberlain otherwise, and they are so close in their greatness that I think for Michael, it just sort of bothers him that LeBron can still do more. Michael can't. Michael's done right now. And Michael, no offense to him, is the owner of a sort of moribund, go-nowhere franchise with the Charlotte Hornets. So this is his way of saying, okay, hey, look at me. I think it meant that much to him that he was willing to put up with all the other BS and criticism just to let a whole nother generation that's still buying his sneakers let him know how great he was. Yeah, I think there's something very personal there with both of them. Absolutely.
How much do you think Jordan's failure as an owner, as an executive, do you think it bothers him a lot?
I don't think so. I think he realizes what he did on the court and his value as a player. And also, let's face it, he's still selling a boatload of sneakers.
Oh, he's making a fortune.
NBA players.
Right.
Yeah, and they're still wearing the Jordan brand.
No
so
question.
Still is the Jordan
no question.
There.
Yeah.
I think if Michael had to do it again, he never would have done the Wizards. But you and I know that's all these players who go to one last team and make that mistake. But yet it's interesting because Michael wouldn't have gone to the Wizards, wouldn't probably maybe even have moved on to Charlotte ownership and the way they're hemorrhaging money. And then you look at LeBron, Cleveland to Miami to Cleveland to L.A. What it shows is different generations. This generation accepts players in multiple uniforms and we buy all their jerseys. Not so much in Jordan's time. Again, another difference between the two eras.
No question. So what do you think happens here with the NBA?
I think tomorrow the players meet. I'm not so sure that these facilities that are opening will open with robust attendance. I think Adam Silver will let the players know this is totally voluntary, but please come here rather than your local gymnasiums, which are more crowded with people. I think the NBA remains in a holding pattern for at least a month. And I think while Adam Silver said it wouldn't be before the start of May they make a decision, I think it's more likely not before the start of June when they do. But I think if NBA players are not in a training camp in June, I think you thank everyone, you have your lottery, you have your draft, you have your free agency, and you move on to the next one.
So you think is there in your mind a date where if they're not playing playoff basketball by, it doesn't work?
Yeah, I think if the playoffs don't start sometime in July. And again, the other part of that is, Mike, you just forget the regular season. You put so many players on hold and told so many international players you can't go home that I think it's hard for the NBA to say, we stop playing on March 11th. We're going to decide on May 11th that if you're not in the playoffs, you can leave, because those guys are like, what were we doing here the last 2 months? But I think that's the only way to salvage this. It's pretty clear in both conferences that if you take the top 8 teams in each conference, no one has an argument as the number 9 team with a losing record. They deserve something or it's unfair. I think you have the teams in the playoffs who won't meet in the first 2 rounds, maybe play 3 games against those teams to get teams back in shape and then move to the playoffs. Will it be legitimate? No. But we know the great players step up to the big moments anyway. LeBron will be ready. Giannis will be ready. Kawhi will be ready. And I still think we can get 2 really interesting months of NBA playoffs if it is safe.
Do you think the vote's overwhelmingly pro-playing for the players?
I think, yes, because they're not the at-risk group, Mike. I mean, that group of robust, healthy 20 and 30-year-olds don't really, if you look at the numbers, have a problem. My own concern is this. there's a bunch of older coaches. There's coaches, approaching their 80s.
Yeah, Pop
There's
won't be there. Riley won't be there. And there'll be the guys like that won't even be there probably.
And so my thing is, I think Pop will try. Mike D'Antoni's an older coach. He said he would. But exactly, and then if a coach has to step away for a reason, it won't be the same thing. I think a lot of what's going on with these practice facility openings have that in mind. I think that's why head coaches are not allowed, but assistants are, because there's some older head coaches. It saves them that decision for Popovich, for Mike D'Antoni to have to decide whether to show up to the gym or not. But there's still a lot more to be played out, and honestly, like Pat Riley told us the other day, it's going to be dictated by the science and only by the science.
Do you think so? I get the feeling, Ira, that as someone who's been around the league as long as you have, you think the smart move is not to play this year.
I said that for weeks. I said, Mike, it's an asterisk season. I hate asterisk seasons. I hate 50-game seasons. I hate when you have to sort of change right before the playoffs. So I'd like to go on to a nice, normal NBA schedule. I'd like to be talking to you now about the upcoming lottery, and if the Knicks are going to get lucky, I'd like to talk to you in June about the top draft choices and how many of Calipari's kids are going to go out. I'd like to talk to you in July about NBA free agency. Get back on that calendar. Think about what the NFL did for itself with the draft. There has never been more interest in something in the offseason. I think the NBA still could capture that now in these ensuing weeks as they move forward. But again, it's a lot easier for me to say to go without $1 billion in revenue than to people who are counting on that money.
No question. Thanks very much. Good to talk to you, Ira. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Mike.
Thank you. Ira Winderman, back after this. .com doesn't know what the heck they're doing, so I apologize, but they couldn't get us patched in, so they just patch us in now. So away we go. We're here till 6:30, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila, brought to you by those who drink it. And as we said, we'll be here until 6:30 this evening, and I'm sure they have a game for you tonight, but I have no idea what it is. We'll find out before 6:30. But, listen, you're going to have a game tonight. It's going to be a Yankee game or a Met game, and that team's going to win the game. That because that's what happens every night. So they'll have something for you later on this evening. I see that baseball's supposedly got a plan, okay? And Randy Levine made the rounds today because I was just reading all these different stories about it. I didn't hear him on the Fan, but the amazing thing is reading the quotes and the stories. He went on 3 different shows without any information. So how many shows you're going to go on without any information? There's no information yet. Nobody had any plan. No one has anything yet. And he said he hopes that he has fans back in the stadium. But you think he would put a call into De Blasio because De Blasio threw cold water all over that. He completely said no chances that happening anytime soon. So what I can't get is how these guys from major professional sports and these offices of the governor and the mayor can never have a conversation where they're on the same page. You got baseball saying one thing, and then you got the mayor's office completely blowing that out of the water, throwing it, basically saying there's not any chance of that happening. You don't have the city open yet, so until the city's open, how are you going to have games here? That's still a long way off. Hey, you want to be hopeful? That's fine. You want to do rah-rah, but hey, there's no plan yet. And today, the union admitted they have never received an official plan. There have been leaked plans. We have seen leaked plans that have been obviously leaked from one side or the other, the different writers, and I don't think for a second that the writers didn't get those from somebody, but there has never been an official plan to this point because Clark said he has not received an official plan yet. They have not even agreed yet on what the salaries will be if the ballparks are closed, which means there is no game revenue, which means that is a amount of money that usually will be, if you count secondary and tertiary revenue streams, would be almost $4 billion a year, counting gate receipts. And that money is not there if there's nobody in the stadiums. So the players who say, wait a second, we got $170 million for April and May, which when you divvy it up comes to about $4 $4,700 and something dollars a game for the veteran players. I don't know what they paid the rookies or if they got what they got. I don't know how they broke it down. Veteran players supposedly got $4,700 and change per day. They agreed to that. But the players say, well, after that, we get full pay. There's no way they get full pay. You know that going in. Now, I don't blame them for saying at the start that would be their negotiating point. It should be. That's where you'd start from. But that can't happen because the revenue streams are not anywhere near the same. You're going to get money from the network television money because you're going to provide network games. You're going to get money from your local radio and TV, which you may own part of or own, any part of or all of based on what the relationship is. There are teams that own their TV rights. There are teams that own cable outlets. There are teams that own parts of cable entities. So it depends on the situation. There are also other little revenue. There's radio money, which can range anywhere from a team making $1 million a year to teams making almost $20 million a year in their radio contracts, depending on who the team is. So, and that money varies. Remember, baseball is different in that teams, other than their network money, they vary greatly in the amount of revenue they take in. The Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Cubs, they take in far different revenue than, say, the Tampa Bay Rays or the Minnesota Twins or the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's always been a great difference. That's why you've had the issues that you've had with luxury taxes and revenue sharing and the like of that stuff that has always been part of modern day baseball, which clearly leveled the playing field. But right now, do I think they will play baseball this year? Yes, I do. I would think they will. I would be stunned if they won't. I do think, though, they're going to have some cities where it's going to be tricky as to when they can get in those cities, and they may have to start some of those teams on the road for weeks if those cities don't open up. Do I think there's going to be cities that won't be open on July 1st? I would think that's probably logical there will be, especially since everybody's opening differently and everybody's having different issues with the pandemic. And you still have where there were 26,000 new cases in the United States last night. So it is still a very big factor. And you have a death rate now that is heading quickly towards 100,000. It's up above 76,000 today. So it's still a major issue. You have other hotspots. New York is not a hotspot now. New York has cooled off dramatically. But the city is not open yet. And you know that there's going to be this opening the corridor of the Northeast in unison that's going to happen on some level. And you know of these ideas of hitting these 7 markers before an area can open up. You've probably seen that already, what the state's going to do in that regard. So we're ways away from that. So all this has to be taken into consideration. And there's the testing, which if you listen to some of the owners today, if you listen to Cuban, if you listen to Mark Lazary, if you listen to some of the other owners, they've talked about this being a very, very big concern for players and for teams. And Cuban made the point, and Cuban's been very smart on this thing. First of all, if you listen to Cuban, he's very smart. I didn't realize how smart Cuban was till I started listening to him. When I first saw him after he bought the Mavericks, and when he first bought the Mavericks, they made fun of him because they thought he bought it for a price that was outrageous. And he did overpay for him, but it turned out to be a really smart buy. Okay, and he's a guy who got out with broadcast.com before the bubble burst in on the .com era, and you know what? He was smart there too. So he's a really smart guy. And if you listen to him come on CNBC and talk about certain stocks, he's been very good at that too. I got to be honest with you, he really has, because I listened to him. And I think his image changed a lot watching Shark Tank, and I think he comes off as being a very, generous and benevolent guy in that regard. With the people who come on, he's got a heart. And he said, hey, my players have to be very careful whose hands they put their lives in. And they know that they're putting their lives in certain people's hands here when they come back and have to deal with daily testing and deal with a core of people who have to be tested, and they have to rely on these people to be testing accurately and to be handling things on a very professional level and making sure their results are correct every day, because their livelihoods are in the balance and their health is in the balance. And he's right about that. And he said, the issue that I am concerned with is my players' health, short-term and long-term. And I think he's very right about that. So what we know is you hear the NBA talking to the players tomorrow and baseball trying to rev things up. And listen, I understand everyone's trying to push. That's really what Randy Levine's doing. He's trying to see if he can exert a little pressure and push a little bit. I don't think he's going to push Cuomo in this regard. I think the numbers are going to push him. I don't think he's going to push the mayor in this regard. I think the science is going to push him. They're going to be dictated by the science. They're going to open or close things based on the science. And we're just going to have to be patient with that. And I think it's very important, and both baseball and basketball have been smart enough to say this. They can't be out in front of the testing where they have state-of-the-art testing when the rest of the cities, rest of the states, rest of the people who go to work every day, people who are sick, everybody doesn't have the same level of testing. Now, everyone expects professional athletes to get the best of everything. But when they have something that people feel everyone should have, especially during this kind of crisis, they could treat the players with great animosity because of that. And I can tell you, go harken back to March when it was first revealed that a couple of the Nets had tested positive, and everyone screamed, where'd they get the test from? I can't get a test. Where'd they get the test from? So from that standpoint, they don't want that backlash. They want to come back and be received just like the NBA, just like the NFL was received for the draft, where everyone couldn't wait to watch, and everyone was thrilled that they came back, and they even liked Goodell. So you could see how much they wanted the sport to come back. And they want to come back under the same kind of feeling. And they should, because they are providing a distraction. They are providing a service. They're providing an entertainment. They're giving people something to do. And especially baseball, I think, provides a therapeutic release for people. I really do. I think baseball is important. I think it's part of our fabric. I think it's part of our culture. I think it's something that is different. It has a quality that other sports don't have because it's been part of our history forever. And other sports just have to live with that. Other sports have passed it in popularity. Other sports have passed it financially. But they still do not have the cultural link that baseball has to who we are. That's just what baseball has. They own that. And I think they will probably always own it. And that's why at times like this, it does serve a very, very important space. It does serve an important role. And it is therapeutic. It is healing. And it would help if it was back. But it's got to work for everybody. It's got to work for the players and their health. It's got to work inside the city that it's in. It has to look the part in that it can't look like they've been given special treatment. And it has to work. You can't open it up for a week, close it down because, 3 players get sick. That would look ridiculous. Imagine you open the sport up and you had to close it because a team came down with 6 or 8 players with the virus. It would be laughable. And that's not, in this day and age and what we're watching, that's not out of the realm of possibility that something like that could happen. They have to guard strictly against something like that. They can't miss that. That can't happen. And that's why this has to be done very carefully. And I think the powers that be will, but it's hard to even get them on the same page because nobody really has any workable information or a workable plan. And that's why this has been delayed. And that's why right now, as you hear people talk about meetings and proposals, no one really has anything concrete to say. And you get contradictions. Baseball, we're ready. Everyone, we're getting ready to go. And you hear executives are ready to go. And then you hear the mayor of that city saying, they're not playing baseball in this town anytime soon. All right, let's get a couple of calls in. Let me do my Mail and Bernie Williams thing for the date here. I got that here. Wasn't a remarkable day. May 7th. Do Bernie first. May 7th, 2006. Now, at this time, Bernie, they're playing the Rangers. Bernie's in right field. This is later in his career, obviously. It's where he starts to play in Philly, and he's not in center. Johnny Damon's in center. He goes 2 for 5, 2 RBIs. He's batting .268 on the season. He's off to a so-so start. This is the later years for him, so nothing earth-shattering on that date. For Mickey, we go to May 7th, 1955, Yankees and Red Sox. Yankees come back on the Sox, who are a woeful team. They're 9-15 already on the season. The Yankees get 2 in the 7th, 1 in the 8th on a Mantle homer, 3 in the 9th. Here's the 55. Now, remember, in the 50s, you go back and forth with Mantle and Berra. Remember, you still had the figure of Ted Williams. DiMaggio's gone after 51. You still have the figure of Ted Williams, who can still be there any one of these seasons because he's still great. But you had Bauer leading off in right field. You had Joe Collins at first base batting second. Mantle in center field batting third. Berra, who, remember, was a 3-time MVP in the 50s. Mickey won 2 MVPs in the 50s. Berra won 3. Mickey finished in the top 2 or 3 every year in the MVP. And he won 3, and he finished second 3 times, twice lost by 1 vote. He bats third. Yogi fourth. Elston Howard is in left field, just to show you how different it was in those days. Ellie's a catcher, but they played their catches in the outfield. They played Yogi in the outfield. They played Elston Howard in the outfield. And Blanchard, their third catcher, was a premier pinch hitter. You had Andy Carey at third base. You had Gil McDougall, if you remember the name, at second base. You had Billy Hunter at shortstop. And you had Scooter didn't start that day. This is late in Scooter's career. And you had Don Lawson on the mound. And Mickey went 2 for 5. Had a homer in the 8th. Had 2 runs scored, 1 RBI, had a walk. For the season, that was his 6th home run. He was off to a so-so start in 55. He's 6'14", 250, 267 at this time. So wasn't off to, for him, now his on-base percentage was .425, but his 267, not off to a great start. In 56, which we'll use a lot, and we've used a lot in recent days, and we'll chronicle a lot of that season. A lot of times it'll be 56, 57, and 61, because those were such big years, especially 56 and 61. For Mantle. Now, 61 wasn't an MVP year. He finished second because Roger hit 61 homers, Mickey at 54. Roger batting in front of Mickey, which was an incredible advantage. Roger hit 61 homers and never got an intentional pass for the entire season. Think about that. You got a guy behind you who is so feared that you get hot enough to hit 61 home runs in the season, and you're never walked intentionally, ever, not one time the entire season, because Mantle was behind him. Now Mantle got off to a phenomenal start in 61, and was batting third. Roger was slumping, so Houck switched them and put Mickey behind him, which all of a sudden Roger then got plenty of fastballs, got red hot. Now Roger had a really good year the year before, won the MVP. Again, beat Mantle by 1 vote in the MVP in 60. Mickey led the league in homers. Roger at 39, Mickey at 40. But Roger won the MVP. And the next year, Roger won the MVP again. So Roger wins the MVP in 61 and 60 and 61. Mickey wins it in 62. And could have won it in 64. Brooks won it in 64. Mickey had his last really good year. 35, 111, 303. Yankees win the pennant over the Orioles and the White Sox. Really good run, the three-team race, and Yankees win it and then lose the World Series in 7 games in what is the last, as you know, the last World Series of the dynasty. It ends after that. Mickey plays 4 more years, 65, 66, 67, 68, on what are mediocre to bad teams, and then retires. But he's really physically done after only glimpses, stayed around for the money after 65. I mean, he stayed around for a couple things like hitting 500 home runs, which he wouldn't have done. But the bulk of his career was 61. It was 51 to 64. And in his first 14 seasons in the majors, he played in the World Series 12 times. Think about that. I mean, how unbelievable is that? Played in the World Series 12 times in his first 14 years in the majors. They were used to winning. I mean, that's just it was 7 wins and 5 losses in the World Series. 7 wins, 5 losses in the World Series, and played in 12 of them, and really was 7-3. Lost in 63 to the Dodgers and 64 to the Cardinals. So 63 they get swept by the Orioles, 64 they lose in 7 games in a Classic Series. So that's basically it. But we'll chronicle that every day with the 2 switch hitters. See how they did in each of the years. We'll do it at least through the days of the pandemic until baseball comes back. Anyway, 6:30. We've been brought to you by Casamigos Tequila, brought to you by those who drink it. Have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow.
Right now, today, Lowe's.